What's up, friends? I'm glad you're here, because today we're diving into a film that didn't ask for permission, didn't soften its language, and definitely didn't care about being liked. Today's story is about Gran Torino, a movie that hit theaters in 2008 and instantly divided audiences. Some called it honest, others called it offensive. Many said it couldn't be made today. But one thing is undeniable: this film left a mark. This is not just a movie review. This is a deep dive into what really happened behind the scenes. The uncomfortable choices, the filming nuances, the rumors, the real names, the dates, the numbers, and the mindset of the man at the center of it all, Clint Eastwood. We'll talk about why the film starts aggressively, why it almost dares the audience to walk away, and how that decision turned into one of the most profitable and discussed late-career films in Hollywood history. The beginning of this story is intentionally rough, even discriminatory, not to shock for no reason, but to force the viewer into a moral position. So if you're ready to hear the raw facts, the uncomfortable truths, and the stories most videos skip, let's move. When Gran Torino was released in December 2008, Hollywood was already shifting towards safer storytelling. Studios were cautious, dialogue was polished, characters were carefully written to avoid backlash. And then this film opened with a funeral, silence, resentment, and a main character who openly despised everyone different from him. Walt Kowalski is introduced not as a likable man, but as a problem: a Korean War veteran, a retired factory worker, and a man frozen in a version of America that no longer exists. From the very first scenes, his language is racist, abrasive, and unapologetic. This wasn't accidental. Eastwood insisted that Walt's ugliness had to be shown fully, without dilution. Before the film even reached wide release, early test screenings caused concern. Studio executives reportedly worried that audiences would reject the character outright, but Eastwood pushed back. His argument was simple: if you soften Walt at the start, his transformation later means nothing. Filming began in Michigan, primarily around Detroit, a city deeply affected by industrial collapse, crime, and demographic shifts. This wasn't a set built on a soundstage. These were real neighborhoods, real porches, real abandoned houses. Eastwood chose Detroit specifically because it visually matched Walt's internal decay, a man surrounded by a world that moved on without him. One critical decision made early on was casting. Many of the Hmong actors had little to no acting experience. Some had never been on a film set before. This created tension, but also authenticity. Dialogue sometimes felt stiff, sometimes awkward, and Eastwood liked that. He believed polished performances would ruin the realism. During filming, Eastwood was known for extreme efficiency. Most scenes were shot in 1 or 2 takes. Mistakes weren't always corrected. If a line came out rough, but emotionally honest, it stayed. One crew member later said Eastwood cared more about truth than perfection. The opening act of the film sparked immediate controversy. Advocacy groups debated whether the film promoted racism or exposed it. Eastwood refused to clarify publicly. He gave very few interviews and avoided explaining the message. His stance was clear: the film speaks for itself. Financially, expectations were modest. With a budget of roughly $33 million, Gran Torino was never expected to be a blockbuster, but the reaction surprised everyone. Limited release screenings sold out. Word of mouth exploded. By the time the film reached full theatrical distribution, it had momentum no one predicted. By the end of its run, the movie earned over $270 million worldwide. That made it one of the most profitable films of Eastwood's entire career, especially remarkable considering his age at the time and the film's controversial tone. By the time filming for Gran Torino officially began, one thing was already clear: this would not be a comfortable set. Clint Eastwood was not interested in creating a warm, protective environment. He wanted tension. He wanted friction. And most importantly, he wanted reactions that couldn't be faked. The shooting schedule was brutal by Hollywood standards. Just over 5 weeks. No luxury. No endless retakes. Eastwood was famous for moving fast, But on this film, his pace felt intentional, almost psychological. Actors didn't have time to overthink. If a line came out harsh, awkward, or emotionally messy, it stayed. That rawness became part of the film's DNA. One major nuance that many viewers never realize is how little traditional rehearsal took place. Eastwood believed rehearsals drained scenes of their power. Instead, actors were given basic direction and thrown straight into performance. For inexperienced cast members, especially the young actors, this was terrifying. But that fear translated directly onto the screen. Several scenes involving verbal confrontation were shot only once. Eastwood didn't want actors to get used to the insults or aggression. The first reaction was the only one he trusted. According to crew members, some actors were visibly shaken after certain takes, unsure whether Eastwood was still acting or had slipped into something more real. He never clarified, and that ambiguity worked in his favor. The Detroit locations added another layer of intensity. These were not cleaned-up streets. Locals often gathered nearby, watching filming from a distance. Sometimes they shouted comments, sometimes insults, sometimes encouragement. Eastwood refused to stop rolling unless safety was compromised. Background noise, stares, and discomfort were embraced as part of the atmosphere. One frequently discussed nuance is how Eastwood handled silence. Many directors rely on music or dialogue to guide emotion. Here, long pauses dominate. Walt Kowalski often says, "Nothing just stares," clenches his jaw, breathes heavily. These moments were not scripted in detail. Eastwood let them stretch naturally, sometimes longer than the crew expected, forcing everyone to sit inside the discomfort. Behind the scenes, there were also subtle power games. Eastwood rarely raised his voice, but when he did, it was deliberate. One assistant director later said that when Eastwood went quiet instead of angry, the entire set froze. That silence carried more weight than shouting ever could. The iconic 1972 Gran Torino car became a symbol not just in the story, but on set. It was treated almost like a sacred object. No one touched it without permission. It was cleaned personally by the car coordinator, not the general crew. Eastwood believed the car represented Walt's last connection to dignity, control, and identity, and that belief shaped how it was filmed. There were rumors during production that the film was loosely inspired by real neighborhood conflicts in Michigan. While the core story was fictional, Eastwood encouraged the cast to draw from real experiences. Several background actors later admitted that some lines spoken in the film were things they had actually heard in their own lives. The discomfort wasn't accidental. Eastwood wanted viewers to feel trapped inside Walt's worldview before judging it. That meant living in it first, breathing it, hearing it, and feeling its ugliness without filters. What made this approach risky was timing. In 2008, cultural sensitivity was already becoming a dominant conversation. Eastwood knew backlash was possible, but instead of adjusting, he doubled down. His belief was simple: if a story avoids offense at all costs, it stops being honest. By the end of filming, many cast members described the experience as exhausting but transformative. They weren't just acting, they were enduring something, and that endurance is exactly what carried onto the screen. As soon as Gran Torino reached a wider audience, the conversation shifted from filmmaking to morality. Viewers weren't just discussing the story, they were arguing about intent. Was the film exposing racism or indulging in it? Was Walt Kowalski a warning or a hero disguised as a monster? And most importantly, how much of this character came from Clint Eastwood himself? Rumors spread fast. Some claimed Eastwood was using the film as a platform to defend old-school values. Others accused him of deliberately provoking outrage to generate attention. Eastwood, as usual, did almost nothing to stop the speculation. He refused long explanations. He didn't apologize. And that silence fueled the fire. One persistent rumor suggested that several racial slurs in the film were improvised. While officially denied, multiple crew members later hinted that some lines were not written exactly as spoken. Eastwood allowed language to evolve naturally on set, as long as it stayed true to the character. That decision blurred the line between scripted dialogue and raw expression, and made critics uneasy. Another controversial point was the portrayal of violence. Unlike typical Hollywood films, Gran Torino avoids glorifying action. Violence is sudden, uncomfortable, and often anticlimactic. Some viewers found this powerful, others found it frustrating. Behind the scenes, Eastwood reportedly rejected multiple suggestions to add more exciting moments, insisting that realism mattered more than adrenaline. There were also internal disagreements about the ending. Early drafts of the script explored alternate conclusions, including one where Walt survives. Eastwood shut those down immediately. He believed survival would betray the story. According to people close to the production, he viewed the ending not as a shock, but as an inevitability, the final consequence of a life built on confrontation. Criticism also came from within the Asian American community. Some activists argued that the Hmong characters were underdeveloped or stereotyped. Others defended the film, saying it was one of the first mainstream Hollywood movies to even acknowledge Hmong Americans at all. The debate became intense, with no clear consensus which, in many ways, mirrored the film's themes. Interestingly, despite the controversy, audience scores remained strong. Older viewers connected deeply with Walt's isolation. Younger viewers were split, some rejected him outright, while others found the arc compelling. This generational divide became one of the film's most discussed aspects. Eastwood himself addressed very little of this directly. In rare comments, he suggested that audiences were too focused on words and not enough on consequences. Walt's language is ugly, but his fate is not rewarding. That distinction, Eastwood believed, was the real message. By 2009, Gran Torino had become more than a movie. It was a cultural argument. Film schools dissected it. Critics wrote long essays. Viewers debated whether it could ever be made again in the same way. And through it all, Eastwood remained unmoved. By the time Gran Torino finished its theatrical run, it was clear this was no ordinary late-career project. Financially, the results shocked almost everyone involved. With an estimated production budget of around $33 million, the film went on to earn more than $270 million worldwide. That kind of return placed it among the most profitable films of Clint Eastwood's entire career, especially remarkable given that it wasn't a franchise, sequel, or effects-driven spectacle. In the United States alone, the film earned roughly $148 million. International markets added another 120+ million. What made this even more surprising was the film's rating and tone. This wasn't a feel-good story. It wasn't aimed at teenagers. It didn't rely on romance or action. Its success came almost entirely from word of mouth. Audience demographics revealed something interesting. A large portion of ticket buyers were over the age of 35. Many were men who hadn't been regular theater goers in years. For them, Gran Torino felt personal, like a story that spoke directly to aging, displacement, and losing relevance in a changing world. Critically, reception was mixed but intense. Some critics praised the film's honesty and restraint, calling it one of Eastwood's most emotionally grounded performances. Others criticized what they saw as outdated perspectives. But even negative reviews acknowledged one thing: the film was impossible to ignore. From an industry perspective, Gran Torino was also viewed as a potential farewell. Eastwood was 78 years old at the time of release. Many believed this would be his last on-screen performance in a leading role. The film's themes, legacy, mortality, and sacrifice only fueled that interpretation. Eastwood never officially labeled it as a goodbye, but the structure felt deliberate. Walt Kowalski is not redeemed through charm or success. His arc is quiet, painful, and final. For many viewers, it felt like Eastwood confronting his own cinematic past, the tough men, the guns, the violence, and closing that chapter on his own terms. The film's long-term impact extended beyond box office numbers. It became a reference point in discussions about representation, generational conflict, and whether uncomfortable stories still had a place in mainstream cinema. Years later, filmmakers would still cite Gran Torino as an example of risk taken at a time when risks were already disappearing. Streaming and home media gave the film a second life. DVD and Blu-ray sales were strong, and later streaming statistics showed consistent viewership year after year. It didn't spike and fade, it stayed steady. That kind of longevity is rare. Years have passed since Gran Torino first hit theaters, but the film refuses to age quietly. It doesn't soften with time. It doesn't become nostalgic comfort cinema. If anything, it feels even more uncomfortable today, and that's exactly why it still matters. The true legacy of Gran Torino isn't the box office numbers or the awards buzz it generated. It's the way it forces the audience to sit with a character they don't want to defend, yet can't fully dismiss. Walt Kowalski is not designed to be admired. He is designed to be confronted. And that confrontation is where the film draws its power. What makes the ending so enduring is its restraint. There is no triumphant victory, no last-minute heroics, no reward. Walt's final act isn't about dominance, it's about breaking a cycle. A man who spent his life solving problems through aggression chooses, for once, to absorb violence instead of releasing it. That choice is deeply uncomfortable for audiences who expect cinematic payoff. For Clint Eastwood, this film stands as a turning point. Whether he intended it or not, Gran Torino feels like a reckoning with the characters that defined his career. The gunslinger, the enforcer, the man who never backed down. Here, those traits lead not to glory, but to isolation and, finally, to consequence. Film scholars often point out that Gran Torino works because it trusts the audience. It doesn't lecture. It doesn't explain itself. It shows behavior and lets viewers decide how to process it. That trust is rare, especially in modern cinema, where messages are often spelled out clearly to avoid misinterpretation. The film also left a mark culturally. It became a reference point in debates about free speech in art, about whether showing ugliness equals endorsing it. Some argue the film crosses lines. Others argue it exposes them. The fact that this argument still exists is proof of the film's relevance. What's important is this: Gran Torino doesn't ask you to like Walt. It asks you to understand what created him, and to recognize what happens if nothing ever challenges that worldview. His story isn't comforting, it's cautionary. And maybe that's why the film still resonates. Because it doesn't offer easy answers. It doesn't pretend change is painless. It shows that growth, when it comes late, often comes at a cost. If you made it this far, thank you. I appreciate you taking this deep dive with me into a film that refuses to be simple. If this breakdown gave you new insight, new perspective, or made you want to rewatch Gran Torino with different eyes, then the mission is complete. If you enjoy content that goes deeper than surface-level reviews, don't forget to support the channel. Like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who appreciates real cinema discussions. Let me know in the comments, do you think Gran Torino could be made today? Or was it a product of a moment we've already lost? Until next time, stay curious, stay critical, and we'll meet again in the next story.